Hello, everyone. I'm going to be reading and sharing this new story I just published on uh, X and my Substack, orf.report. And it's going to cover this book that there we go. I guess I chose the wrong background for this, but this book was on display, a new release from the APA. The APA's imprint, Imagination Press, APA being the American uh, Psychological Association, and it's the largest professional organization of psychologists in the country. And here we go. Please let me know everything sounds all right. I don't do these streams too often, but I thought this story was worth sharing with everybody on YouTube as well. So here we go. The American Psychological Association, the APA, is mis and disinforming kids with its new kids book on mis and disinformation. The book is called True or False: The Science of Perception, Misinformation, and Disinformation. The APA engaged in a real-life conspiracy with the CIA to bolster Bush-era torture. Now its new children's book seeks to, quote, pre-bunk young readers from investigating conspiracy theories. It also misinforms kids on other topics, including racism, gender, and the COVID-19 pandemic. I said the words COVID-19 pandemic. Will this get demonetized and suppressed? Probably. All right. So I'm summarizing this book with a number of lessons that it effectively teaches kids. So lesson number 1 is that COVID doctors never lied. It says, quote, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the book says, there was, quote, seemingly conflicting information from scientists. Seemingly. Needless to say, the messaging is completely contradictory. Trusted experts lied about masks, vaccines, and the virus's origin. Please refer to some of my compilations, mashups for that. Start with the unvaccinated. They said the vaccine stopped transmission. It did not. So moving on. Instead of teaching kids to exercise critical thinking when it comes to COVID-19, the book tells kids the experts did nothing wrong. Quote, this was just how science works, it tells the kids. The book then blames the spreading of false information and death on, quote, friends and family. Yeah, weird, right? I'll read directly from the book now. It's a couple paragraphs directly from the book. Quote, some people understood this was just how, well, I'll start with the paragraph ad. Goes, during the COVID-19 pandemic, people had a hard time knowing who to believe and what information to trust. The confusion was made worse by seemingly conflicting information from scientists and doctors in the early days of the crisis. That conflicting messaging hasn't stopped. Especially when it comes to the origin of the virus. Messages changed as scientists began to learn more about the disease and how best to control its spread. Some people understood this was just how science works. Early research may indicate one thing, but further studies result in different conclusions. Unfortunately, our leaders never communicated that they didn't know what the hell they were doing. They assured us that masks worked, and they assured us that you shouldn't wear masks. Then they assured us that everyone needed a vaccine to help stop the transmission. Then we are told, even though they knew behind the scenes, CDC emails show, they knew damn well the vaccine never stopped transmission. We were told that it couldn't possibly have come from a lab. That's a crazy conspiracy theory. Then we were told, maybe it came from from a lab. And the overwhelming amount of evidence supports the lab leak theory. Okay, back to the text. The children's book goes on saying, but other people started to wonder if the experts weren't so expert after all. Some people became more willing to believe false information from those who seemed more confident than scientists. Since people were very worried, they talked to friends and family about the virus a lot. This meant false information was spread quickly. Did you catch that? That's wild framing. To go from, since people were very worried, they talked to friends and family about the virus a lot. This meant false information was spread quickly. It's placing the blame and solely on friends and family for talking a lot. for talking to each other a lot. Meanwhile, the scientists, they only seemingly spread conflicting information. That's just how science works. All right. Whew. That's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2, don't ask questions. Now, guys, asking questions is a crucial step in the scientific process. I was taught that in school. I don't know about you guys. That's step number 1. Observation, ask a question, then hypothesis, and so on, then experimentation. But the book teaches kids to, quote, beware of questions. Quote, disinformation can be spread just by asking a question, especially if the person asking can't even answer their own question. Just think about that. So if a question is asked and someone can't answer the question they're asking, which is why you should ask a question if you don't have the answer to it. But if you do that, if you ask a question where you can't even answer your own question, this children's book says that's disinformation. Beware. Beware of those questions. All right. Now, it gets worse. It gets worse. The book's example of such disinformation is a girl humbly asking a logical question. The illustration has the girl asking, quote, I'm not a scientist, but why would we all have this snow if global warming was real? That's a perfectly logical question. And instead of just answering that question, the book frames it like this little girl is some kind of nut. The book draws another kid, as you can see, reacting to the girl as if it's crazy to ask a basic question. The kid's just thinking in his mind, what? In all caps? Exclamation point? What? A basic question? I better beware. This could be disinformation. Lesson number 3. Yeah, I know this seems like satire, guys, but this is real. This is real. This is freaking real. Lesson number 3. Corporate media is good and trusted. This is what it's teaching them. Media gatekeepers are good and trusted. See, guys, you see the friendly gatekeeper man in orange there? Only true information passes through the media gatekeeper gates. That's what it's telling kids. That's what it's displayed now. And of course, there's no mention that quote newspapers and quote trusted news shows can also spread disinformation, which is what any book that claims to be about science or objectivity would explain. You don't trust a source or a story based on the source. You evaluate the source and its sources, primary sources, and then you judge credibility based on that. Whew. Yeah, let's read from the text. I mean, that illustration, you just can't, that's just amazing. Okay. Unlike, this is from the children's book, children's quote science book. Unlike books, newspapers, or trusted news shows, the internet does not have a gatekeeping mechanism. It doesn't have a way to fact check information for accuracy before it is made available to the public. This means a lot of what you read or see online or on social media might not be reliable or exactly true. And some people can take advantage of that to spread disinformation. Now, all that's true, but it makes no mention of the fact that these trusted cable news shows and newspapers, they have the same problem, that people can take advantage of uh people to spread disinformation through those channels. And they do all the time. And of course, and then the book goes on, during the COVID-19 pandemic, a small number of people spread a whole lot of disinformation, some of it dangerous. The nonprofit Center for Countering Digital Hate identified a dozen super spreaders. So you see, all the bad guys are just randos, or in this case, I guess they had significant followings on social media. So it's framing it as if the only source of disinformation is from social media, people on social media. And I cannot get over that illustration. Look at that. The friendly gatekeepers, they only let true information through those gatekeeper gates. Wow. All right. Lesson number 4. Only white people can be racist. The book only says, quote, minority groups and, quote, people of color can be victims of racism, omitting the obvious fact that white people can be negatively stereotyped and victims of racism too. I mean, this book is about supposedly protecting kids from misinformation. That is inherently misleading. It's a true statement, and this is how the disinformation experts, I would say, correctly describe misinformation or disinformation. There's a true aspect to it, but it's inherently misleading. That is inherently misleading, because why are you only saying that stereotypes, negative stereotyping and racism only can affect minority groups and cause racism towards people of color? That's just completely unnecessary. You can say it more accurately with less words. That's always a big red flag, is when you see something explained with more words than it needs. And if it had less words, it would be more accurate. I'd say that's, anyway, that's often a hint that something is misinformation or disinformation. Stereotypes, the more accurate, concise way to say it is just stereotypes and assumptions can lead to negative feelings or negative stereotypes or racism. Yeah. Okay. But you got a whole paragraph, and it only singles out that can happen to minority groups and people of color. Moving on to lesson number 5. Some people say equals research. I don't know if you guys remember, but I think there used to be, well, it's still around. It's called fair.org. It's a media watchdog site. But they did used to be a lot better. But anyway, they noticed that Fox News would constantly be using that phrase. This was around the Bush administration, George W. Bush administration, maybe prior as well. anyway, it's no way exclusive to Fox News, but when you say, oh, some people say, so they would frame things to their guests and frame stories as, oh, some people say da 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 da, but it did, who's the some people? Like, they didn't even have any example, or there weren't actually people that you could cite in some instances. Like some people say Iraq is going really, the war in Iraq's going great. Like, who are these some people, and what the hell are they basing this on? Anyway, so this book in this section here, it's conflating some people say with research. Underneath the headline, check out the research. The book shares no research, but says Black lives are at risk in American workplaces because, quote, some Black people say code switching is necessary simply to survive and keep safe. Okay, now I'll be honest, guys. I wasn't familiar with the term code switching, but it apparently just means you change how your behavior based on your company. And I mean, it seems to me like most people have to code switch when they go from home to the office or the workplace. You just behaved. I mean, it's just anyway. But again, the book frames it as if this is something that is unique to one demographic, and not only but uniquely life-threatening. Quote, necessary simply to survive and keep safe in a world of traditionally white-dominated spaces, is what the book says. Lesson number 6. Boys and girls aren't different. There's no difference in athleticism. Now, again, in this case, this section, it doesn't say anything wrong, but just think of be aware of what it's omitting. So the APA's the book's example of logical fallacy here, misleadingly suggests there's no athletic difference between boys and girls. So, okay, here you go. Because think about this statement, quote, more boys play team sports than girls, therefore boys are more athletic. It says this is an example of a logical fallacy. And that's true. Just because more boys play team sports than girls, that doesn't mean boys are born more athletic. But the thing is but they are, like you can't just because that's, and so it suggests to readers that boys are not more athletic than girls. And and the definition of athletic is like more muscular, stronger bones, more muscular, I think is a common definition of athletic. Muscular. Okay. And so because that is the common definition of athletic, boys are more athletic. Now, there's plenty of exceptions. And again, that's just on average. You know what I mean? Like, many girls could kick guys' asses, could kick my ass. But on average, guys are more athletic. It goes on. It's a fancy way of saying the conclusion doesn't follow from the argument. A logical fallacy happens when someone presents an idea and says it leads to a conclusion when it really doesn't. It's illogical. Can you think of any other reasons why boys might play more team sports than girls? There are many, like what others might expect, social expectations, or if teams are available for both boys and girls. Okay. So now that's all good stuff and accurate. And it's true. And it's asking the kids, oh, so because you can't assume that, oh, just because boys are more athletic than girls, that's why more boys play team sports. That's true. You can't make that assumption. One doesn't necessarily to the other. And it is correct that social expectations and team availability are influential. Those are factors in how many girls and boys play sports. However, it omits the biological factor, and this is interesting. So there's good research, strong research, and it's published in the by the APA itself. So it's funny that its children's book is contradicting this science. But this is just from the abstract. I did go through the whole thing, but that's not what this is about. But in a nutshell, there's compelling evidence that prenatal hormones contribute to that, to why boys play more sports, team sports than girls. And so some of the compelling, I said I wasn't going to go into it, but I'll share one too. Some of the compelling evidence is that girls who are born with more of these certain hormones, with prenatal hormones, they are more interested in team sports, and so they are more likely to play team sports. So that's interesting. So the girls with more of these hormones, like boys, they end up playing more team sports. So there's that difference between the girls who have a more similar hormone makeup than other girls. Yeah, so they have a more similar makeup with boys than other girls. They end up playing more team sports than the typical girl. So that does suggest that the hormones plays a role in why boys play more team sports. Anyway. So again, my point is, it just leaves out these other possibilities. And also just the initial framing is misleading, because it does seems like it suggests that boys are not more athletic than girls, which they are, even though it is correct that it is a logical fallacy to say because they play more team sports, they're more athletic. All right. Lesson number 7, Russia. In this children's science book, they touch on foreign and domestic politics. Russia is the only country mentioned to spread disinformation, which gives kids the false impression that Russia is the only country that spreads disinformation. Somebody on X replied to my thread, and they pointed out that the book says, in 2021, Russia attacked Ukraine, and the Russian government, made fake videos to justify this invasion. So at the beginning of this section, in this book about misinformation, it's spreading misinformation. It's actually because Russia invaded in 2022, not 2021. Anyway, that's minor. Maybe it's just a little typo, but whatever. And obviously, that's not the significant stuff that I've been focusing on. The stuff that's significant is all this ideological stuff, and the fact that they're framing disinformation as a Russian problem, as a uniquely Russian problem, not a problem that's, unfortunately inherent to all governments. Okay. And then it goes on to talk about Hillary Clinton. This science book is talking about Hillary Clinton. And of course, Hillary Clinton is painted only as a victim of disinformation, never a purveyor of it herself. Of course, in reality, Hillary Clinton spread disinformation about Trump-Russia collusion, falsely accusing Trump or a political opponent of both treason and stealing an election in 2016. Lesson number 8, don't criticize government. Only wackos criticize government. The book directs kids to a government-funded online disinformation game called Bad News. Its creator, Tilt Studio, works with the US State Department, NATO, the EU, and the UK government. It's a government-funded online excuse me, disinformation game or game to teach kids about disinformation. And obviously, as you unsurprisingly, at least, the game gives kids the message that, if you complaining about the government is disinformation, basically. Well, there you see it right there. That's the ad for this government-funded disinformation game where kids can get some, quote, hands-on practice spotting misinformation and disinformation. And here on the game creators site, Tilt Studios, they openly say they're working with organizations such as the US Department of State's Global Engagement Center, the European Commission, and the UK Cabinet Office. Now, according to the Bad News Game, the first step to becoming a disinformation and fake news tycoon is making a public complaint about the government. So in this game, the theme, the premise is, it's okay. It has the kids play the role of a disinformation spreader. So it's kind of weird, creepy, but and the idea is, okay, their stated idea is they show kids how it's done, then it helps them how disinformation is spread, and that would help them recognize disinformation when they see it. Now, the issue is that, like I said, it frames it as if complaining about the government is like this signal that you're spreading disinformation, which of course it is not. That would be a logical fallacy. Anyway, so this is how the game begins. I just took a screenshot of these are the first parts of the game. It says, "Hi there, good to see you. My job is to guide you in your quest to becoming a disinformation and fake news tycoon. You're probably frustrated about something, right? Aren't we all? You can get started by using Twitter to vent." And it gives you a few choices of posts to start your, quote, disinformation and fake news account to become a disinformation and fake news tycoon. And this example it gives you is a tweet saying, quote, "This government is a complete and utter failure. #resign, losers." That's the first step to becoming a disinformation and fake news tycoon. Just a simple general complaint about the government. So you can see how kids might get the impression, which is obviously intentional, to make people think that, oh, people who complain about the government better watch out. That's disinformation. That could mean they're disinformation spreaders. And that lesson leads to what I call lesson number 9: conspiracy theories aren't real. Just in the same way the book directed kids to that government-funded disinformation game, it also directs kids to a YouTube page whose second most viewed video smears people who believe in the lab leak as conspiracy theorists. And it's just a little clip. All right. So, I mean, this is ridiculous. Like, so this book is clearly pushing, political ideologies and beliefs, not teaching kids actually how to spot disinformation or misinformation, right? And that's just another incredible example. Just a little I don't know, factoid. This guy, John Cook, he created a game like the Bad News game. It's called Cranky Uncle, and it's the same idea as that Bad News game. And it's just to frame, it, you know, in the Crazy Uncle, Cranky Uncle, it's just you instead of having the kids play this disinformation fake news tycoon, they play this old uncle with literally with the tinfoil hat on, who complains about stuff, as the prime example of disinformation you need to watch out for. All right. And it also, it like attaches like intent, it frames as if like, cranky uncles are like, they intend to mislead, or even so. It's just, I don't know. Needless to say, it is itself misleading. And I mean, there you have it, the creator who's creating a game to help kids, to allegedly help kids recognize and spot misinformation and disinformation, is spreading misinformation and disinformation about the origin of the pandemic, saying that it is a crazy conspiracy theory to say it came from a lab, or even consider it, to believe it. It's nuts. All right. Again, I have to stress it. Like, there is never any evidence that COVID came from nature. There wasn't. There isn't. They tested the wet market animals. None of them had COVID-19. None of them. Remember, that was the original narrative. It came from nature, an animal in the wet market. It was brought into the city from an animal in the wet market. But none of those animals tested positive. And people like Tony Fauci went on the news to say, he said, "Oh, well, I don't believe, the Chinese, they're hiding something." It's like, so he's being he's conspiracy theorizing on the news, on Face the Nation in this case, about this big cover up, this big, but it makes no sense, because it's in China's interest to find proof or even evidence that it came from nature, so that they aren't responsible for it leaking from their lab, a U.S. government funded lab, but their lab nonetheless. Okay. Now, APA's book dedicates 5 pages to villainizing conspiracy theories. And one part I found particularly ridiculous is it suggests that merely learning about conspiracy theories makes people think, quote, makes people think that truth doesn't matter. I mean, so they're obviously trying ostracize. This is just an attempt again to like, just in the way the Bad News game was teaching kids to ostracize and beware of people who criticize the government. It's teaching kids to beware of, conspiracy theories, not just to be skeptical of them, but beware, because it, quote, could make people think that truth doesn't matter just from learning about it. So you learn about a conspiracy theory, and all of a sudden, truth doesn't matter to your brain anymore. When, of course, in many cases, people who are considering conspiracy theories, like that crazy lab leak theory, it's because they do care about truth, and they're looking, they have a real desire for the truth, not because they think truth doesn't matter. And again, one of the big ironies about this whole book which is published by the APA, is that the APA itself engaged in a conspiracy with the CIA, collaborating with the CIA on torture during the Bush administration to help them justify torture by changing the APA, the American psychologists, psych motherfucker, uh, psychological association, the American Psychological Association. They worked with the CIA to change their ethics, APA's ethics, written public ethics, so that the CIA could say, look, we're not breaking any ethics. Just look what the APA says and all. So there you have it. So again, you got this institution clearly captured to some degree, clearly, that engage in a real conspiracy theory with the CIA, the DOD, the White House, and this children's book, villainizing conspiracy theories. Anyway, so I end the thread with, like, maybe if this thread is shared enough, APA will one day have to address all the misinformation spreading into the minds of children. The same way they did eventually, after years of denial, they eventually apologized for secretly collaborating with the CIA on torture. So again, that only happened after, there were many whistleblowers. They kept denying it. And then finally, an independent investigator that actually they hired, their conclusion was, yeah, they they engaged in, they were collaborating with the CIA secretly. So yeah, so they did eventually apologize. That was about 2015. Here's a headline in The Guardian. U.S. torture doctors could face charges after report alleges post 9/11 collusion. Leading group of psychologists faces a reckoning following repeated denials that its members were complicit in Bush administration era torture. I don't believe anybody went to jail, but the leadership, at least leadership, were, basically fired. They said that they were retiring, but they the order in which that happened, right after this investigation final report was published, obviously it was related to that. Let me read you a little bit more from this article, this Guardian article from July 2015. Quote, the largest association of psychologists in the United States is on the brink of a crisis. The Guardian has learned after an independent review revealed that medical professionals lied and covered up their extensive involvement in post 9/11 torture. The revelation, puncturing years of denials, has already led to at least one leadership firing and creates the potential for loss of licenses and even prosecutions. For more than a decade, the American Psychological Association, the APA, has maintained that a strict code of ethics prohibits its more than 130,000 members to aid in the torture of detainees while simultaneously permitting involvement in military and intelligence interrogations. The group has rejected media reporting on psychologists' complicity in torture, suppressed internal dissent from anti-torture doctors, cleared members of wrongdoing, and portrayed itself as a consistent ally against abuse. Now, a voluminous independent review conducted by a former assistant U.S. attorney, David Hoffman, undermines the APA's denials in full and vindicates the dissenters. Sources with knowledge of the report and its consequences, who requested anonymity to discuss the findings before public release, expected a wave of firings and resignations across the leadership of an organization that Hoffman finds use its extensive institutional links to the CIA and U.S. military to facilitate abusive interrogations. So there you have it. Don't torture yourself with dishonest experts. Follow me on X and subscribe to me on orf.report. There's my little plug. So let's see if there's any. I'm just going to go do a quick roll through. If anyone's got a super chat, I'm happy to address it. But then I got to move on to the next report. KM says, Matt Rocca, any chances you do uncensored on Rumble? Yes, I should do that. Sorry, I don't have time to do that this evening. But yeah, everyone please follow me on Rumble. YouTube censorship is awful. And I've been ushering people to join Rumble, follow me on Rumble, where they really do care about free speech. So, but it's tough because I got to go on YouTube to tell people that, right? To move people over there. So I'm doing that now. Someone, Baby Gerald says, pre-bunking. Get out of town with that shit. So yeah, pre-bunking is what they call it. And actually, in the intro of this, there's a little message to parents, and it says, they consider this a procedural pre-bunking for your children. So all that, quote science that I went through in the thread that the book talks about, is the whole purpose is to give a procedural pre-bunking to children. Kind of creepy. All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and thank you, KM, for the super chat. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Peace.